6:59. Nobody would challenge that. You got it recording? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Jerry Cabasco. Cecilia Green. Robert Perry. Tracy Smadilla. Rich Miskowitz on behalf of the Chamber.
Here.
Joe Laporte.
Here.
Adam Lewinsky.
Here.
Dan Gunstein. Here. Stephanie Ganzi.
Here.
Great. We've got 7 out of 9, so we have a quorum. Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay, we have the October 8th meeting minutes to approve. Has everyone had a chance to look those over?
Yes, motion to approve the October 8th meeting minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, and all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Thanks. It was seconded by Commissioner Lewinsky. Got it. Okay, Joey. Thank you.
Okay, we have a very exciting event coming up, Small Business Saturday, where everyone should go out and shop small.
We do. Before we display these videos, you know how much I love Small Business Saturday. Those of you who have been on the EDC for a while, this is the 3rd year that we're promoting it. It has existed, I guess, since 2010, it says. Actually created by American Express. And what Small Business Saturday is, as the name suggests, a day to promote small, locally owned businesses. Everybody knows of Black Friday and all the massive shopping that goes on and all the big box retailers and all the malls and Amazon and eBay's and all the e-commerce sites that are out there. And I always admit that much of my shopping, my family shopping, is done on those sites and types of big boxes as well. But people should keep in mind all the small locally owned businesses in our community. And of course, Bartlett is comprised mostly of small businesses. Not a huge amount of retailers, but if you look through the 400 licensed businesses in Bartlett, a vast majority of them are categorized as small. There's some nationals, there's Home Depot and things like AutoZone and Dollar Tree out at Route 59 and Stearns. But if you look through the downtown area, it's mostly all small businesses. And even when you go to national businesses like for instance, Subways and Dunkin' Donuts, Jersey Mike's, those are all franchise owned as well. So a lot of times I think of those as small businesses, but not necessarily in the sense of Small Business Saturday. So anyhow, Small Business Saturday is on November 24th. I fill out some documentation every year now, the 3rd year, on the American Express website, kind of detailing how we aim to promote it. And you can see just out here, I have one of the little tote bags here, one of the placemats in front of the dais, some of the posters here. We get, I get basically a box of giveaways. Cecilia is aware of these because we distribute them to Arts in Bartlett along with some of the small businesses in the community. So one of the things I want to show you tonight are 2 videos that we've done. I want to double check what the first one is before I show it. This is the shorter one? Okay. This one that I'm about to show is currently airing on Comcast Cable that started today through Small Business Saturday. And I didn't include the statistics, but again, the 3rd time we've done this, it's showing about 600 or 700 times. It's showing throughout different cable networks. I have a schedule. If anybody would like to see what the schedule is, all I have to do is forward it by email with the disclaimer that sometimes when they say a commercial's going to air at 2:15 on ESPN, and you're watching at 2:15 and it doesn't show, and then 2:20, 2:25. It's usually 10 to 15 minutes on either side of it. As I've learned over the years doing commercials, sporting events are probably the hardest one to schedule, just because you can't predict exactly when all the breaks are going to be. But when they're showing a rerun of a sitcom or something, they can tell you pretty much exactly when it's going to run. So I'm not going to rattle off all the stations, but I looked at it. It's running on ESPN, is probably the most expensive one that I looked this year at the different rates that the different channels charge, so that's kind of interesting. There's a few ESPN ads that are running $30 each, and there's a couple of them that are $1 or $2 each. The total ad campaign for this particular one is $2,500. And unlike past years where I paid $500 for production, we paid our intern, Joey Dienenberg, who you see here every month at the EDC and who does our minutes and generally helps myself and Scott with much of what we do. He produced both the one that's showing on cable that I'm going to show you, and then the longer one that should be published. I scheduled to publish on Facebook 6 minutes ago. So that one would have posted at 7 o'clock. So you've heard me talk enough, and here's the 30-second commercial.
Make a difference this holiday season, where you eat, shop, and stay. Go local first.
I'd like to invite you to come and see us in downtown Bartlett for Small Business Saturday.
Come see us at Arts and Bartlett on Small Business Saturday.
Come visit the shops at Banbury Fair in beautiful downtown Bartlett for Small Business Saturday.
Small Business Saturday. Come down and visit the shops at 138 South Oak.
So celebrate the holidays and go local first.
So as you can see, that one is kind of quick, down and dirty, but it gets the message through. 30 seconds goes by pretty quickly. And then here's one that I had scheduled to post to the Discover Bartlett page just a few minutes ago, the long version.
Make a difference this holiday season, where you eat, shop, and stay. Go local first. When you go local first, you're putting your money back into the community you know and love during the holidays.
Hi, I'm Greg Anderson. I'm the owner of Spin Doctor Cycle Works in downtown Bartlett. We are Bartlett's only independent bike shop. We've been here for 22 years. I'd like to invite you to come and see us in downtown Bartlett for Small Business Saturday.
Hi, be sure to pop in to Arts and Bartlett, 215 South Main Street in Town Center on Small Business Saturday. We'll be open from 11 to 4 with vendors having tables full of holiday items, jewelry, pottery, all unique gifts that you won't find anywhere else because it's all handmade by local artists and crafters.
Good morning. Come visit the shops of Banbury Fair featuring new to you out in the oldest barn in Bartlett, the Bartlett Candy House. You can do Island for your kids' birthday parties, and the shops at Banbury Fair from beautiful downtown Bartlett for Small Business Saturday.
Small Business Saturday. Come down and visit the shops at 138 South Oak on the corner of Oak and Oneida. The Bartlett Coin Shop,
VIP Barber Shop,
Book Ladies Book Attic,
the Plaza Boutique, and Little Shop on Oak. Open 7 days a week.
Merry Christmas!
So celebrate the holidays and go local first.
So first thing I want to do again is commend Joey D here on his editing work for producing not only these, but all of our Discover Bartlett Business Spotlight videos. So this is Joey here who does those, so thank you for that.
Yeah, good job.
I
And
just sent him those photos like 5 o'clock today, right?
And you got
those
them in
extra-
there?
I think we had them a little earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sometimes, I shouldn't speak for him. He hasn't spoken yet at the meetings much, but I think takes them from some of the Facebook posts sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So, again, November's typically one of my favorite EDC meetings of the year. You know, these businesses are unique to the village, and some of them have been here for quite many years, or decades in some cases. A few of the businesses that we featured last year actually closed during the year. I don't know if people are aware of there was a skateboard shop in Bartlett Plaza that closed recently. And also there was a boutique / iced tea / ice cream place that closed. So it's important for us to continue promoting the small businesses in town and patronizing them. And just, again, as members of the Economic Development Commission, if you see fit and are willing to, I would appreciate it. We would appreciate it if you could share some of the Facebook posts that we do, because a lot of the ones that get the most views are typically the ones that get shared the most. So, again, Small Business Saturday, a week from this coming Saturday. And any other questions or comments?
I actually have a couple questions. So you said there was a $2,500 budget for putting it on like local cable stations?
Yes, I should elaborate a little bit. Bartlett is within the Schaumburg cable zone.
Okay.
And within, I don't have the chart in front of me, but it includes Schaumburg, Bartlett, and I think part of, I'm sorry, not Bloomingdale, might be part of Hanover Park.
Okay.
But also for this one, I put it into what they considered the Bloomingdale cable zone, and that has about 8 or 10 communities. That goes kind of straight down the train line. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I know that, I mean, it goes, this one's showing all the way to Itasca and Wooddale, and I think in total it's 10 or 12 communities that this is showing throughout probably 50 different cable channels at all various times of day. So.
What all I was going to suggest was maybe to take part of that budget, even like $500, and kind of mimic the ad on social media, Facebook probably, and like in those same communities. So you'd have like more visibility, like maybe they see it on TV, but then they also see it on Facebook or vice versa, just to kind of, make them think about it twice, hopefully.
That's a great idea. Yeah, we want,
Less than 500 as well.
I mean, yeah, you could probably set a pretty low.
Do it for less than 500.
Yeah.
right, I've done those before. You set the budget basically per day. You can say it's 10 per day for a certain amount of time, or 20 or 30 a day, something like that. So
But you can even
that's a good
just
idea.
target the same exact communities that you feel like we could draw people into that day.
Right, we might not go as far with the Facebook ad, but probably, you know what, just like we talk about with businesses and site selection, with, say, a 10-mile radius or a 15-mile radius, draw a point, at Village Hall, do a big radius about 10 miles in every direction, so you catch, we've done that before. So we capture some of Elgin, we go east into maybe Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates, and some of the bigger communities. So that we'll definitely act on that.
Okay. And then, is there that coupon book again this year? Or did something change with that last year?
No, we didn't put together a coupon book for the Bartlett this year.
Okay.
Still something we can do in the spring. There was some interest, and a few people did inquire about it. It was something really, wasn't necessarily intended to be a permanent fixture, but it was something actually conceived of at the EDC at a meeting where basically I sat here about 10 years ago, and we started talking about different ways of helping, the same types of businesses we're talking about, the small businesses that were struggling during the recession. I don't want to really relive that at this point, but every month I was talking about businesses that were closing back then. So we brainstormed a lot of different ways to boost them, and that was something we started actually back in 2008. I did it for about 10 years. Did have a few people request it, so when they requested, I either offer them to be featured on Discover Bartlett with some type of coupon or incentive, or something we can do in the spring. If the EDC feels we should continue that, we can do like a shop Bartlett in the spring type of thing.
So, yeah, my other suggestion with that then would be, if you're doing some of the social media paid sponsorships, to let all the businesses know, so the ones that maybe would like to offer something can also do like a sponsored post. You can even say like, here's what we're targeting on here, and they could set it the same and then have their coupon or whatever they want for next Saturday on there. And so then it would, be showing up in someone's feed at the same time, and then they could grab it for next week.
And we can do that, especially Banbury Fair. Actually, a lot of the businesses there have participated, including the bike shop has done that in the past. And again, some of them might report that only one or two come in. Some of them, Banbury Fair I always mention because they get the most of those coupons in, and they tend to get the most extra shoppers on Small Business Saturday. Nobody measures it exactly, but I can report to you that the businesses that you saw there, I'm in very close contact with them. And anecdotally, Cecilia will tell you at the pop-up shop on Small Business Saturday, they get quite a bit more traffic than they typically do. And all the businesses featured in that always tell me that.
I think most of the businesses will be offering like special sales, certain percentage off. I know we're saying the first, I don't know how many bags you gave me, I need to count them. First 20 shoppers get the free bag, and we've got buttons, and coupons don't usually work that well for us. Normally, as people walk in and you say everything today is 15% off.
I don't know if it's a sign of the times, but usually I would give bags to everybody and put piles of them everywhere. They sent me 150 in 2016 and 2017 and just sent half that amount, 75 this year. So when you asked, I just gave 10, I think, or
I've
10 to
got 10?
15
Okay.
for all the businesses.
First 10.
Yeah, it's not too many. Thanks for your suggestions.
Okay, anything else on Small Business Saturday? We have siding marketing plan that's coming up on the agenda again.
Yes, let me move ahead a little bit on that one. Oh, Joey? Okay, not that you're going to read that all on there, but the short of it is that in the TOD plan, identified various opportunity sites to develop in the downtown, and one of them was labeled Opportunity Site E, which the easiest way to explain it to people who know the downtown well is it's the parcel east on Railroad Avenue that Town Center never finished developing. I've got some attachments here that kind of show it, but a page from the TOD plan, and I'll rotate this, kind of shows you where this site is, located at the southwest corner of Railroad and Berteau. The village owns this, and it was identified as one of the more shovel-ready, kind of easier sites to develop. And what has transpired on this, now that it's basically 3 years since the TOD plan was adopted, is the first year or two, there were just kind of, I'm going to characterize it as sporadic interest in it, where a developer would call us and we'd meet with them 2 or 3 times and send them a lot of information and kind of go over the ins and outs of developing site in Bartlett and what type of buildings we wanted in our downtown. And then ultimately, for one reason or the other, whether it was their financing falling through or the incentive maybe wasn't lucrative enough or whatever the case may be, ultimately passed and never developed it. Almost a year ago at this point, last December, I wrote up a request for proposals. That's why you say it came up again, because we issued an RFP giving developers about 3 months to respond. And after, when the February 15th due date came about 9 months ago, we got one response. It was a very, very good response, I want to say. It was from a developer called Foxford Communities, who had offered basically the asking price for the parcel and had proposed to do one large building of 41 units designed to look like row houses. And again, through a series of factors, they were unable to move forward with it, so it remains available today. And in a staff meeting a few weeks ago when we were discussing what to do with this site, rather than issuing another RFP for this and spending several months and hoping for good responses, right now what we're going to do is start marketing it as if the village staff, myself namely, and Scott are going to be the brokers for this site. We're going to, a little bit about the site I included here, just kind of where it is, the type of development that could be built on it. The TOD plan had it listed as a potential 38 unit building, but some of the interest from the developers is certainly would be for a larger building than that. Let me rotate this again. So what we're going to do, and this wasn't in the packet because I got two different items since the packet went out, is number one, ordering the first real estate sign with my name on it. This should be going up on it by the next time that we meet here. And this would be a V-shaped sign facing the train tracks, so people can see it when they're passing by the site. And then a little more importantly than that, because there's only so many people who ride the train out to Bartlett and beyond and might see it and have some interest in it, is I'm working on, I don't have a rendering of this, but I'll bring it to an upcoming meeting, is to do our own real estate flyer for it. And then so we're going to list it on LoopNet and CoStar. Rather than engage the services of a broker like we did for the 11-acre piece of land, I had an aerial photographer go over it over the weekend. He must have gone out a few times because some of the photos have some kind of snow and frost on them, but he took about a dozen photos over the weekend and emailed them to me this morning. So I wanted some nice photos like this to include in the marketing brochure. So, like I said, I have a lot of photos I could show you of this site from all different angles, but long story short is Site E still remains available for development. It's still a site that the village is open and willing to entertain condominium buildings or apartment buildings. The interest in suburban condominium development in this day and age is approximately zero, but the apartment development demand is still strong at these TOD sites. So we're going to target specifically developers who are active in this market with TOD type development. So I wanted to bring that back to you. This isn't a site that we had forgotten about. I talked about it a lot during the TOD planning process since the village controls it. One thing I do want to add is that the minimum price on this is set for $660,000, and we came up with that number because it's not within a TIF district. The village is obligated to sell it, can still engage in various types of incentives, but the last appraised value of the land that we had done had it at $825,000. It's about a year old, so it could be worth slightly more, but the village needs to sell it for 80% of appraised value. So $660,000. Soon I'll have a marketing flyer for it. You'll be able to see it on LoopNet, and it's something else that I'm going to ask those of you who are engaged in any way, shape, or form in the real estate development market to share it. So, and now I'm ready for any questions or comments or suggestions on Site E.
I've just got a comment. I work on the association for Bartlett Terrace Apartments, the property just south of there.
Right.
And of course, our concern is the proposed right-of-way. that was on the near-term strategy. I would suggest possibly looking at just keeping north-south traffic on Berthoud. If the proposed road goes through, there's not much of an advantage. You're cutting through a parking lot where 24 families live with 80 people, and it's a narrow space as it is. So that's the spot just south. I would suggest just maintaining a natural buffer all the way across, and then use the existing Berthoud for north-south access, especially with the recent potential sale of Gorski's. That TOD plan showed the proposed road going through 2 parking lots at Bartlett Terrace and then through the Gorski parking lot. So I would just like to suggest that for the record. I don't know if the person that, from the design firm that looked at this really thought that through.
That's a very good suggestion. When this ultimately, well, I'm going to say it will get developed. It's a matter of how and when and by whom. The point when it does get developed, they'll still have to go through the site development process. Even when the village was ready to sell this piece of land to Foxford Communities for the one building, they never really even got to the point where they were going through the public process, but that's something that still would need to be done. And so I only mention that because the site plan could be a number of different things. I can tell you generally that the developers who I have spoken about this site with typically are not interested in doing multiple buildings. They're typically more interested in doing one larger building. So the long story short is I can't do a site plan analysis until, or nobody can until something is submitted, but it'll be definitely well thought out. It'll be a public review process. There will be public hearings, just like when somebody goes for a special use permit. So it's not something the village, we would like to sell the land, obviously, and get something built there, and really to increase the downtown population. But the site plan will be something that has to go through the whole review process with staff and then public hearings.
Tony, I have a question. Have you guys thought about, or are you opposed to professional building there?
Haven't thought about it, and I don't think the village would be opposed to it.
I just think it would
The
generate.
village is always open to more commercial.
I mean, looking at something like the chiropractic office that was built right here down the street, to me, that site would make a great location for a building of that nature. You know, professional on the first floor, maybe 2 stories of residential.
We haven't considered that, and like I don't think the village would be opposed to that. Just from a commercial standpoint, anybody we've spoken about it for commercial hasn't been interested in it, just because of the perception that it's been hard enough to fill the spaces that are like right up and down Main Street in Devon, and this one's not visible from the street, and it's really not a commercial thoroughfare that way. And by the same 2 other reasons, I mean, number one, the TOD plan where it was analyzed and discussed for quite a long amount of time. And one of the things that was identified that would help the downtown in general is simply more, as they say, heads in beds. There's more people who, if we can increase the residential density of the downtown, that in turn would help fill all these office locations and patronize the restaurants. So I'm going to say we wouldn't be opposed to that, but that's not really the way we're formulating our marketing plan for that site.
I think during the TOD, there was some analysis of how many rental units there were in Bartlett and the vacancy rate.
It was amazing. It was the only thing that I've ever seen that they said 100% occupancy in the town. And you're absolutely correct. There hasn't been any new rental besides units that were built as condominium units and townhomes that have since been rented out, there haven't been any new developments of rental properties in the town for over 30 years. And some of the buildings that exist that are rentals don't have the modern amenities, I guess you could say, that some new development would have. So it's good recollection on that. Yeah, they did an analysis, and Bartlett's rental market was very, very tight. Not a lot of units for rent. The overall percentage was very small, 10% or under, and 100% occupied. And keeping in mind now that study is from statistics about 2.5 years ago, but there still hasn't been any new rental housing built since then.
Do you think the trend is still toward people looking at renting instead of buying, as it was at that time?
No, I mean, it's still, because of the location of this as a transit-oriented development site, that's why how I'm going to answer this, because of its proximity to the train station and the downtown amenities, I would say that the demand still seems to be stronger for apartments. Pretty much every economic development function I've gone to the last year or two, most of the communities from Elmhurst to Lyle to Des Plaines are getting massive amounts of rental apartment projects. In a lot of cases, 500 or 600 or more in some of these communities with no condominium projects. So I would say the demand is, there's a concern that demand will subside at some point, but it hasn't yet.
Do we have any kind of data to show, like I know at one time we wanted to bring like the double income, no kids, but like data that would show like what would come first, like bringing the people in, or would people want to live there with the amenities that might be around, or there maybe lack of amenities that are around for that, if we're marketing towards those type of people?
I'm not sure what data you mean, but the data that was presented in the TOD plan was basically modeling on various types of housing demand.
Okay.
It's hard to say, I suppose, but the developers that we've met with, that's kind of their key point, is basically just a pro forma on a piece of paper of the land price, the equipment price, the construction price, how much rent they think they can get. And the ones that we've met with had a certain price point that they felt comfortable with, but didn't feel comfortable going a little higher that some of the other communities are getting. They were talking about $1.75 or so per square foot. Some of them were talking about $1.85, but none of them were really comfortable with getting to that $2 and above point for that. And I think that's one of the reasons some of these developers have pulled out, but that's kind of getting into the deep nitty-gritty of what they're looking. Construction price, property taxes, and also everybody that we met with would have, when I say amenities, we talk about different types of things that other properties in the town don't have, like health facilities inside them, or e-commerce delivery rooms and things like that. Every one of these apartment developers plans for that these days.
Do you know, is there like a certain age bracket that they mentioned? Like, are they?
It's like you mentioned, it's either double income, no kids, and empty nesters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Piggybacking on what you said, I think part of the question was, as a developer, they have to take a risk in building this building and selling it or renting it. And when they look at it, I think what you were implying was there's not a lot of growth within the town to bring that developer's risk level down or his concern down. And I think that, kind of like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah, that's exactly
They look
what
at a
I
lot
was
of
thinking.
positive growth in the town as a whole. And if you could present something to them, or as things happen to developers, to spark their interest in this, I think that would drive this sale faster.
That's accurate. We do share as much information as we can about that. Like the new Bartlett tap coming soon, and the other business next door that we're working with coming soon, and the potential redevelopment of Bartlett Plaza. The projects that they see around the downtown, when they see things happening, it does build more excitement for that type of thing. So that's a point well taken, too. Yeah, this would be a part of building up the downtown, but also, you're right, for them to take on the risk, they typically want to see more things happening.
I think if they see things happening in a different manner, you're not just limiting it to dual income, no kids, or empty nesters. You'd be able to bring your family here, and you can walk to different amenities, more amenities than what we have. Because they can already walk to the school that's right across the street from them. So, I mean, that's a huge positive family draw. Kids can walk to school.
Absolutely.
And the denser downtown gets with occupants, then that encourages more businesses to open if there are people.
Right, it's all part of the same
Yeah.
equation, really. The businesses want to see more people, and the people want to see more businesses. And they feed off of each other. And what we seem to have now is a few more businesses and developers that are looking to invest into the downtown, but that you're correct, there hasn't been any new housing units built in the downtown area for quite a few years at this point. And definitely no rental housing with all the amenities.
Any more questions on that?
In my humble opinion, I think the correct way to do this is just what you're doing. Apartment rentals, they'll bring in different ages of people, working people. You got the train station right there, you got downtown right there. I think having such closeness to proximity to trains and downtown, right in the middle of Bartlett, is a big selling point. I think what's missing is the marketing of the property. I think with proper marketing, the price is not bad. I think you should do it. It just has to be marketed properly.
We agree. I'd love to be sitting here at some point when it's warm again out a few months from now telling you about different proposals that we're considering. And that's the whole plan for doing this. After the plans from Foxford fell through, there was another apartment developer who, it's a long story, but had been interested in it but didn't respond earlier, who was calling and emailing a lot about it and had made an offer on it and has since basically backed off. So we were hoping to be able to sell it without going through all those steps with the other developer. It's interesting, and last thing I'll share about this, one of the big challenges for this site is that it's small. Some of the apartment developers that I've spoken with don't want to do any projects of less than 200 units. That tends to be the number for some of the bigger players that you hear about doing projects in these other towns, and you simply can't do that many units over here. So because there's an economy of scale with any project in terms of the infrastructure that you have to put in and some of the labor costs and stuff like that, it's easier for them sometimes to build a 100 apartment project than say like a 60 apartment, or it's similar. So that's one of the things we ran into is a few people, the first few inquiries I made, people just told me it's not big enough.
You know what I feel, you have the big developers, you have medium developers, you have small developers. And it's all in the marketing. So you're going to find the right developer for the right size that he's interested in if it's marketed properly. Because the location, there's nothing wrong with the location. The apartment thing there, as far as the zoning, is perfect. It's right next to the railroad station, downtown. I mean, it's hard to find a piece of property like that, close to downtown and a railroad station.
Absolutely.
So, Tony, market it, get it done.
Thank you.
If they need larger, can't we show them Site F?
I'm sorry?
If they need a larger 500, 200 units, can't we show them site F? Would site F?
Site F, you have to describe, I don't know all the sites off
Oh, is it, it's
the one that's
across
south
the
of it?
street, east of site E.
Directly east.
Due east of site E on the other side of Berteau.
Yeah,
Looks like a
that
larger
one is,
parcel.
that is a really good site, and that one is owned by Metra, and that's its whole, that's a long staff report on its own. I can tell you that it is owned by Metra, and there are thoughts in both the villages and Metra's future plans to have that site developed. It's about 7 acres. The short version of it is that any part of that site that gets developed as anything besides parking has to have parking provided, replacement parking provided by the village on the village's cost. That's a land bank future parking site for Metra. Not to say it will be parking, but just to say that that's the agreement that the village has with Metra.
So would it ever be beneficial to negotiate Site E for parking versus?
Well, the village owns Site E. We really just want to get an apartment building.
Okay.
It's another 10 years. All right, Tony, can you let us know what's going on new business-wise in town?
Yes, I had notes to mention 3 different things quickly. One is you should see the invitation to the Village of Bartlett Holiday Open House on December 7th. As a member of the EDC, you are invited to that and should have received something to that effect. Has anybody received one?
I got
think
one.
it was being
Yeah.
mailed out. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just do a friendly reminder of that because that, our EDC meeting will be that following Monday. So we won't see each other again at EDC until after that. So make sure to RSVP by the end of the month if you'd like to attend that. It's always nice to see you folks in that setting. Second thing I wanted to mention, I had briefly mentioned Bartlett Tap. And without going again into great detail, because you will definitely be seeing information on that in very great detail next month. I've been working very closely with the gentleman who leased that space, John Castilla, who's been working very hard, very diligently every day for months on getting Bartlett Tap reopened. So he is working on putting together his beta grant application. He had hoped to have it for tonight's meeting. That was going to be something we were going to be talking about tonight, but there's just so much involved with it. We met last week, and he's got 9 different contractors now he's working with and trying to get all the paper together on it. So I just want to mention, because people always ask what's going on with Bartlett Tap. So we will have a meeting in December, assuming he can get all the paperwork into me within the next 2 weeks. I've asked him to do that. And so I can't describe what the beta application will be right now. I can just generally describe it as everything.
Is that the original owner, or is it someone new?
No, brand new. He's leasing it. The original owner of it, the business entity, the Mr. Dano, who owned it for over 35 years, he's out of it. The long story, and that made short, is it got foreclosed on. A buyer, an investor purchased it, sought out somebody to lease it. I met with about 10 different potential operators, and he leased it in late July to this John Castilla, who we met with quite a few times, and he agreed. He's calling it Bartlett Tap. We said to go back to the original, it was never actually named Bartlett Tap. It was Bartlett Tavern and Grill, but known as the Tap. So he's reopening it, I should say, as Bartlett Tap, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months. But he should be before you next month with a beta application.
Awesome.
And then one last thing I wanted to mention under new business, Amita opened. After 4 years of the Dominick's being empty and trying to fill it, and then spending a year caught between a triangle between Amita Healthcare, V-REIT, who owns the center, and Albertsons, who controlled the lease, the parent company of Jewel. It took nearly a year for them to come to that lease agreement. That was basically all of 2017. And they've spent basically all of 2018 building it out. And they had a ribbon cutting about 2 weeks ago, and they opened last Monday. So biggest vacancy in the village at the time filled. Now our biggest vacancy is the former Bartlett Fresh Market. So I wanted to mention that is now up and running.
Is there like a website where you can see what all's in that building? How do we know?
Yeah, well, it's under the Amita umbrella. I can't remember the exact, but it's basically like Amita Health / Bartlett. Amita is they're the largest healthcare provider now in the state.
Yeah.
So they have their own Bartlett, it's within the Amita website.
Okay.
It's a little bit of everything.
What all's in there?
It's really it's kind of like a small hospital, really. They ended up spending about $30 million on the build out. I toured it and basically you wouldn't recognize it, but it's a big project and they finally opened. So I want to make sure everybody knows that. I'm going to have to find a doctor there pretty soon.
And then work's progressing on Maze?
Right next door to you?
Yes.
Yes. As a matter of fact,
noise,
out
it
of all
sounds like
of all the businesses that I'm working with, that's actually one I haven't really kept much track of their progress. But I know they want to open within the next few weeks. There was another similar business that got approved over a year ago and still hadn't opened, but it's very close, called Olivia's Place. It's in Oakfield Plaza, and both of them would like to be open by the end of the year, so.
So I think I saw that Mr. Rafidia's beat application was accepted. Do we know if he closed on the property? Didn't he have like 60 days?
He has not closed on it yet, and there's other issues besides the beta application that he has pending, and one of them is a property tax incentive that we're still working on and in progress. So the short answer is no, he hasn't closed on it, but we are still working with him and still with not just a little hope, very strong hope that he follows through and that we can work with him to get that deal done. That'd be a big one.
Anything else?
I have one more little question. The ICSC show, how did that go with the other communities?
Oh, thanks for bringing that up too. Yeah, that went pretty well. We participated as a member of the Access O'Hare West group. It's a 2-day show at Navy Pier where the first day is very busy and the second day is kind of like a ghost town. But it went pretty well. I think there were, out of the 10 towns that worked together for Access O'Hare West, I think 7 of the communities participated in the booth. One of the towns just wasn't at the show because they couldn't make it for scheduling, that's Bloomingdale. And then Schaumburg always has their own booth. And come to think of it, Elmhurst shares the Choose DuPage booth. So there were 7 communities, and we had some fruitful meetings. Scott and I met with a couple different developers and businesses, so it was a pretty good show.
And Stephanie, did you go to the boot camp?
I did.
Do you want to report?
Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I thought it was very interesting, just coming as a commissioner. I think what really stuck out to me was Mark Peterson of Intersect
Illinois, yes.
The method that they went through trying to get businesses to come to Illinois was very eye-opening, and I thought it was something that you can almost like replicate anywhere, which was really just getting the research together for what these different companies, the information, the data that they'd want to see to make a decision. And that organization, that's what they did. They put together the reasons why a certain company might want to come into Illinois or find a spot in Illinois. Of course, that could change now with the changing of the guard, but I thought the process was excellent. I'm trying to think of a few, I wish I had my notes in front of me.
Well, there were a couple of the utilities made
right.
presentations as well, but honestly not as compelling as Mark Peterson with Intersect Illinois. And as Commissioner Gansey mentioned, with the recent election and the upcoming changing of the guard, who knows how these state economic development organizations, how they're going to function or who's going to be with them. They do, I can say this now from having done this for 18 years, that with every new governor, the state always changes its economic development policies and programs and organization. But Mark Peterson was very, very impressive in terms of the marketing they do for the state. You can only take my word for it, and Commissioner Gansey's now at this point, but somebody who gives you a lot of confidence for representing the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and like you said, hearing from the utilities, I think one thing I realized was all the different moving pieces that have to be considered before someone would come in, and just even how they were talking about the time frame to hook up to the grid, to get all the utilities working.
Right.
It was just kind of eye-opening as to like what a business owner, especially some of these larger places coming in, what they have to consider before they make the final decision on where they're going.
They do. Well, I could talk all day about this, but the longer you're involved with economic development or doing these types of projects, the more you can see all the moving parts that are within a project, whether it's purchasing and redeveloping a shopping center or reopening Bartlett Tap or building an apartment building or a gigantic industrial project in the business park. They all have different factors that they look at. And that's one of the things they talked about at the boot camp. Of course, the utilities have their own perspective that it's all based on utilities. The state has their perspective that it's all based on state tax law. If you speak with a workforce development agency, they'll think it's all about the workforce. But truthfully, it's all these things together. So anyway, I've been a member of Choose DuPage since it formed. You'll hear me speak highly every time of that organization because we're in 3 counties, and out of the 3, I can easily say DuPage does the most to boost their county's economy.
Good. Tony, do you have an update on the developer who's interested in the old Gorski's shopping center?
Yeah, that's who, I think they were just asking about the status of Mr. Rafidia's project. He remains under contract with it. The village board approved the 50,000 beta application, and right now, the main thing that he's seeking is a property tax breakthrough Cook County. So those are, there's somebody we're still working with and doing whatever we can. We can't control all those sides from the village perspective. We're trying to do whatever is within our village's control to continue supporting him and encouraging him to move forward with it.
So do we know what the guidelines are for getting the tax benefit for him?
Well,
A certain amount of empty spaces that they look at? I mean, do you know what the perimeters are?
I do. There's one of them that he's challenged with, and that is proving declining property value. I mean, it's called a Class 7, and the Class 7 has its own set of guidelines that a property that need to be proven by the petitioner in order to go through. The village has to endorse a Cook County property tax incentive, and the village always will, assuming it meets all the qualifying marks. So he's hired a tax attorney who's challenging some of those aspects of it. So it's not something the village can just say that it qualifies. It has to be proven that it qualifies, and that's something he's paying his tax attorney to work on. If he can prove that up, the village will support a resolution, and with any property tax incentive through Cook County, a resolution from the municipality has to be attached to the application to the county. You can't even apply to the county unless the host community endorses it. We will endorse it as long as it's proven.
That he, not him, but his attorney is going through the motions of getting Class 7 approved for the property.
Correct. Well, as I mentioned, the village has to endorse it, and we can only endorse it if they prove all the blighting factors. The vacancy factor is easy. It's proven. We have the amount of vacancy there. It's been 8 years. So that's not the issue. It's even a vacant building left year after year vacant can increase in value according to the assessor. So what you have to do is challenge the assessor on it. And that's not something that the village per se does. That's something that a property owner or purchaser would do.
Well, I'm hoping, and then maybe we're all hoping here, that he has a good tax advisor, attorney.
Well, he hired an attorney in the city our village attorney, this is at this point, mostly between our village attorney and his attorney. And he hired an attorney who specializes in tax law, so hopefully he'll be able to earn his keep with that.
Sounds like he's getting the dog out of the cage.
We can only hope.
Sig him.
Well, when you own 18 shopping centers, I'm sure you have a good tax attorney.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, I would think.
You're welcome.
Okay, Terry is here today for the public comment part. Generally limit those to 3 minutes, but if anybody has any questions after he's done, we can extend it a little.
Yeah, I think because last time I was here, you guys asked really good questions. I even found out a lot of good stuff on the Spruce Creek Trail. Before I go through that, I'm sorry, what?
Is the microphone on? I can't hear.
There.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. A couple of comments. Small Business Saturday. Hey, come to Spin Doctor Cycle Works. We got warm socks, warm gloves. We got flashing lights, all kinds of good things for gifts. On that catalog coupon, getting spring tune-ups on their bicycles is a really good thing. So we always like that. And so anyway, when I was here last time, you'd ask some really good questions. So I did some digging. And on this first page, actually the first and second page are 2 pages from a 30-page report that you can find at IPP, which is IllinoisPrairiePath.org. But I just wanted to highlight on this first page, there were 7 infrared counters that were measuring the traffic on the trails. And we did surveys. In fact, I still remember there was a family of 5 from Dundee who by the time they finally got to Army Trail Road, the kids were exhausted. And they were still going to be going down to Wheaton. I can't imagine the ride home. But if we'd had a little sign that said, hey, why go to Wheaton? Just come over to Dogfather and Sonic. I think we would have made a happy family there. So anyway, all that information was collected, and the U of I did a statistical analysis on it, and it's, like I say, it's 30 pages long. But page 14 is on the back side of that, and I just wanted to, mention that the average expenditure of the trails travelers was $14.29, and somebody even spent $40, so that was good. And most of it, 21%, was in restaurants and bars. So by building the Brewster Creek Trail and putting a few wayfinding signs out there at the state park, we can send a lot of people into downtown Bartlett. And same way from the east and the south. We're really well positioned. So this trail is going to be a good thing. What you challenged me on was the costs. So I sent out some notes to a couple different engineering firms, kind of giving them, hey, I think this trail, it's going to cost like $3.1 million, and we need a phase 1 engineering study and all of this. And the vice president over at Christopher Burke Engineering, who does a lot of work in the village, by the way, sent back and said, hey, your cost assumptions seem reasonable. Usually the village would initiate phase 1. So I really need the economic development commissions to help push this, because it really is an economic development kind of issue. Now, the thing that I did learn about phase 1 engineering is that the grants for phase 1 engineering are very few and far between, and they usually go to villages with very low economic status, poverty kind of things, and the village of Bartlett certainly is not in that category. I mean, we're reasonably wealthy. So it's very unlikely that we would get phase 1 engineering grant. That means I got to go out and raise $200,000 so I can come back to you and say, hey, help me. Because once we get phase 1 engineering paid for, phase 2, which is going to be about that $3 million, we can get 80% funding. And I think we can share it with the county and the state and the others. But first I got to get through phase 1 engineering. So that's going to be my job, to get that $200,000. And if the village would help at least verbally support the idea that it's a good idea, it would certainly help me. I'm lining up meetings with newly elected county, forest preserve, state, and our U.S. congressman to meet with them and get support. And on the last page, one of the things that we're asking the new administration for is 2% of the IDOT budget for biking and walking projects. That would be about $50 million. So out of that $50 million, I'm going to try to carve $200,000 real quick. So you asked some really good questions, and I learned that, oh man, I got to go get $200,000. So I'll be back to you. Anything you can do to help support it, I would appreciate it.
Well, thanks for this information.
That's very helpful. Tony, as the village, where do we stand on the future trail projects with the bicycles and walking?
It's not typically treated as an economic development issue, but there is a bike and run committee specifically designed to address bicycling and running. And as I learned at last month's meeting, they meet quarterly. And from a staffing standpoint, the information that Mr. Witt forwards to me is information that I'm going to be forwarding to the Bicycle and Run Committee. And then in terms of policy that the village has towards biking and running, I have to claim I don't know at this point, besides that committee addresses seeking grants and ways to improve it. I know that that's their mission, is to improving the bicycling and running amenities within the community. And there's some dedicated members of that. I know Mr. Witt, I thought was on it, but learned used to be on it. But there's a committee that meets much as the EDC meets to address these issues.
Is there a step between improving what we have and starting a new bicycle project that the village can undertake if they were interested. At this point, I don't think they even know about this or could be interested in it, but if they are already doing something about the existing, it wouldn't be that big of a step to take and say, well, what can we do to improve what we got and further improve for the benefit of the village?
I'm not really the staff person to speak on that because I've never been to one of the Bike and Run Committee meetings. I have a lot of economic development things that I'm working on. But in terms of how the village would do that in general is there's always a capital budget, and it's typically done in 5-year increments. And so the village, one of the things Bartlett's always been great at, not just good, but one of the best at, is the long-term capital planning to make sure the roads are in tip-top shape, the sidewalks. The biggest expenditure now in that regard is going onto the Lake Michigan water next year. So, I mean, Bartlett always takes its long-term capital budgeting very seriously and plans well for it. And I suppose if the village board wanted to, at some point, address some bike path improvements that are within the village's purview, then it could become part of the capital budget. Also, I want to keep in mind that some of the bike paths that residents request, and I think Mr. Witt speaks of, isn't all within the Village of Bartlett jurisdiction. Some of it along West Bartlett Road I know goes into unincorporated areas, and I think some of it also goes into Elgin.
One of the things about the Brewster Creek Trail is it's to connect like Westridge residents with downtown Bartlett. In 2 years, South Elgin will have a path all the way from their downtown to Westridge. So it just makes it that much easier for our residents out west to go to St. Charles, to Elgin and South Elgin and do their shopping there. So
I have two.
Valid point. We don't want our residences going to other towns because it's easier to take a bike ride, for sure. I mean, I totally surprised at that. But the long-term project that you're talking about, when do they meet on that?
I'm sorry, the capital budget?
Yeah.
It goes through the budget process that starts, I think, probably next month. We're on a May 1st budget, so the actual budget hearings that we present to the village board typically happens throughout the 2 meetings in April, but that's the end product of months of working on it.
Is that something that the citizens can take part of and bring that up at the meeting?
It's typically staff-driven, and I mean, the budgeting process is done on a department-by-department level, and it's typically done, with a lot of input with the board in terms of what their priorities are. Again, I can only speak towards the aspects of the budget that I work on. I wouldn't want the Public Works Director to be talking about the economic development budget, so I'm not really going to talk about, some of the other departments and what their budget process is or what their priorities are.
That's not what I mean. I just want information on when Mr. Witt or anybody can approach the board at the time that they would be talking about capital improvements.
Yeah, at a board meeting would be the appropriate venue for that.
Public comment.
During the town hall process. And I can tell you, as somebody who works on a fairly, like the TIF budgets, for instance, are budgets that I help put together. I mean, that's a process that I have to begin working on this month, into next month. They're due. For us to do our May 1st budget, typically some of the budget sheets that we work on, we start in November and December. So to come to a board meeting within November or December, I suppose, would be a good time to address the board for that. I think what they're going to find is it's not an economic development matter.
I agree, and,
There's a committee for this already.
yeah, there is, so you're looking at essentially an $850,000 problem, the way I look at it? Is that accurate? So, for us to justify anything from, our position here, we gotta justify the foot traffic. A little suggestion, because I did actually read all the studies. Yeah, I wouldn't simply highlight they're extremely misleading on where the money actually goes and the amount of people that actually come through. So maybe, and I'm willing to email and help you with this, because you got to come down to a figure of actual Bartlett traffic that will be benefited here. And that, I think, needs a lot more refining than what was given, because it was extremely, did anybody else read this?
Yeah, I
It was
agree.
very interesting how top-heavy it was. The exact same people used the trail, and also how top-heavy it was. It went towards bicycle.
That's, like, I would say, like, agreeing with you, it's not really showing me like an economic development benefit. Like, I'm not saying, I like the part about like the triple, like, yeah, there's 3 different things to look at, but I would definitely not say that this would be like from what I'm seeing, an economic.
It's gonna be hard to, and I'd vote for a tax. I'd be happily, as a citizen, pay $200 to get this done, if we all chipped in and just did it. But you're gonna have trouble finding from that 21% that went to grocers, shoving that down into, whittling that down into how much would be Bartlett grocers, and then how much tax we make off that. It gets real small real quick, is kind of how I read it. So it's gonna be tough, but again, I'm happy to help put that together if there's a case to be made. And I definitely, as a citizen, would vote for it.
So then the other board that talks about like the trails, he can meet with them and they can bring a recommendation to the village?
Yeah,
Like, that makes the more
exactly, right.
sense than,
Exactly, yeah. Bike and Run Committee would be the right body to address this.
Okay, thank you very much and good luck.
I think we could say that we're behind this, we
Yeah.
just don't, we're not here to, we can't do anything about it, but we're trying to find out where something could be done and where your voice can be heard.
No, I understand, and I appreciate your response and your questions. They certainly helped me in the months since I was last here, find out a lot of good information.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for
thanks.
coming.
it would be cool.
Is there anything
Keep
else? Anything else before we adjourn? Do I hear a motion for adjourn?
I motion we adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Aye.